The church bell rang softly, its echo bouncing against the old stone walls of St. Michael's Parish. Inside, the pews glowed under candlelight, casting long shadows on the marble floor. Every Friday evening, Ngozi walked through those doors, her scarf neatly tied, her Bible clutched against her chest. To the world, she was the perfect parish daughter, gentle, devoted, untouched by sin. But behind the veil of her quiet eyes, she carried a secret. Each time she entered the confessional, her heart beat faster, not because of the sins she listed, but because of the man who listened from the other side. Father Damien. His voice was smooth, deep, commanding yet gentle. The kind of voice that could quiet storms in a restless soul. Ngozi always told herself her visits were for cleansing, to remain righteous. But lately, her prayers lingered too long on the memory of his gaze. He was different from the other priests, younger, sharper, a man who looked like he belonged on billboards, not behind a pulpit. The parish women whispered about him constantly, yet none dared get too close. He was wholly untouchable. That evening, as she knelt, the wooden screen slid open. She felt her chest tighten. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," she whispered, her voice trembling. "How long since your last confession, my child?" His tone was calm, steady, but to her it carried a dangerous weight. "Last week, like always," she murmured. He chuckled softly, and the sound ran through her like fire. "You are the most consistent soul in this parish." Ngozi lowered her gaze. If only he knew. She wasn't here because of her sins. She was here because of him. And though she prayed for strength each passing week, the line between faith and forbidden desire blurred a little more. Father Damien was unlike any priest Ngozi had ever known. His sermons were not dry lessons read from the scriptures. They were fire, laced with passion that stirred the heart. When he spoke, the congregation leaned in as though each word were a secret meant only for them. But for Ngozi it was different. Every glance, every pause in his voice, every smile he offered seemed carved just for her, even when she knew it couldn't be. The other women noticed him too. After Sunday Mass, the girls from the choir often lingered, hoping for his attention, some even dressing too boldly for church. But Damien remained detached, always polite, always distant. To Ngozi, that detachment only made him more irresistible, a man who belonged to no one, yet lived in her thoughts like he had been placed there by God himself. One afternoon after catechism class, she lingered in the courtyard while others left. Damien walked past, his cassock brushing against the stone path. Their eyes met, and just for a moment the world slowed. His smile was brief, almost hesitant, but it burned into her skin like sunlight. That night, she lay awake staring at her ceiling. The candles had long melted down. Her rosary lay cold beside her bed, but her heart refused to rest. She remembered his voice, the curve of his lips when he said her name during communion. She tried to pray it away, but each whispered Hail Mary only pulled her deeper into the dangerous thought. What if he wasn't a priest? What if he was just a man and she, just a woman? Her chest rose and fell with the weight of it. Ngozi knew she was dancing on the edge of sin, but some part of her wanted to leap. The parish was silent, the kind of silence that came only after midnight. Rain tapped softly on the stained glass windows as Ngozi slipped into the confessional. She told herself she came here because her heart was heavy, but the truth burned brighter. She wanted to hear his voice again. The screen slid open. Father Damien's deep voice filled the small wooden booth. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," she began, but her words faltered. Her throat tightened. He noticed. "Take your time, my child. The Lord listens even when the words are hard." Ngozi's fingers twisted around her rosary. "It's not the Lord I'm afraid of," she whispered. "It's myself." There was a pause longer than usual. Damien's breathing shifted, heavier, as though her confession touched something in him. "And what burden do you carry, Ngozi?" She closed her eyes, her pulse racing. "Desire. I dream of someone I cannot have. Someone forbidden." His silence cut sharper than words. The air between them grew charged, dangerous. Finally he spoke, his voice softer now, almost human, almost vulnerable. Desire is not always sin. It becomes sin when we let it consume us. Her lips trembled. But what if it already has? The words lingered in the air, daring him to guess who she meant. Damien's hand pressed against the wooden divider, as if restraining himself from reaching through. Then you must pray for strength, he said firmly, but his tone betrayed him. It wasn't only counsel. It was warning. Warning for her and for himself. That night, Ngozi didn't sleep. She replayed every syllable, every pause until she was certain. He had felt it too. The annual parish retreat was meant to be holy, a weekend of fasting, prayer and meditation. Worshippers filled the retreat center, their voices rising in hymns that echoed through the open hall. But for Ngozi, the retreat became something else entirely, a prison of temptation. Father Damien stood at the altar, leading the evening prayer. His words carried authority, but his eyes, they betrayed him. Every time his gaze drifted across the crowd and landed on her, it lingered just a heartbeat too long. Ngozi felt it each time, like his stare was stripping her soul bare in front of God himself. During group discussions, he sat across from her, speaking about discipline and purity, yet his fingers fidgeted restlessly with the edges of his Bible. Their eyes collided once, then twice, and by the third time, she lowered hers in panic, her cheeks flushed. He noticed. He always noticed. At night, the youth choir rehearsed in the chapel. Ngozi stayed back, arranging hymn sheets, when Father Damien walked in. The flickering candlelight made the shadows dance across his face, softening the harshness of his priestly color. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. "You should not be here alone this late," he said quietly. "I could say the same to you, Father," she replied, her tone braver than she felt. Their eyes met again, this time unbroken. The world outside melted away. For a moment there was no chapel, no vows, no sin. Only a man and a woman, burning silently in the same forbidden fire. He took a step closer before stopping himself, clenching his fists as if anchoring his body to the ground. "Ngozi!" He said her name like it was both a warning and a prayer. Her heart pounded and she whispered back, "Yes, Father." He didn't answer. Instead, he turned sharply and walked out, leaving her trembling in the silence, torn between guilt and the undeniable truth. She had seen it in his eyes. He wanted her to. The rain poured heavily that night, drumming against the church roof like restless fingers of heaven. Ngozi found herself once again walking through the doors of St. Michael's, drawn not by duty but by a force she could no longer fight. Her sandals splashed against the wet floor as she made her way to the confessional. Her heart thudded louder than the storm. She knelt, the familiar wooden booth closing her in. A few seconds later, she heard the other side slide open. His voice came steady but lower than usual. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," she whispered. "What weighs on you tonight?" Damien asked, though his voice carried an edge, like he already knew. Ngozi gripped the rosary in her hand. Her lips parted, trembling. "It's not my sin that burdens me. It's my desire." The silence between them stretched, broken only by the rain. She felt his presence pressing against her even though would divided them. Then she dared. "It's you, Father Damien. I dream of you. I want you." A sharp intake of breath came from his side. She had crossed the line, shattered the veil. For a moment she expected anger, maybe banishment. But instead the screen slid open and his face appeared, shadowed, conflicted, burning. "Do you know what you're saying?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "Yes," she breathed. "I know exactly." His hand trembled as he reached through, brushing her cheek. The world collapsed into that moment, priest and parish girl, both betraying vows in the house of God. He leaned closer, and when his lips found hers, the kiss was desperate, hungry, like years of restraint breaking at once. The confessional was no longer a place of forgiveness. It became a place of fire. When they pulled apart, gasping, Damien pressed his forehead against the divider. "This is madness," he whispered. Ngozi's eyes glistened. "Then let us be mad." The night after their first kiss, Ngozi could not stop smiling. She replayed it endlessly in her mind, convinced that destiny had bound them. In her prayers she called it love, even if the church called it sin. Every glance from Damien, every word, felt sacred to her heart. But behind the altar, another truth unfolded. Late into the night, while the parish slept, Father Damien lingered in the rectory. One of the choir girls, young, wide-eyed and eager to please, stood nervously before him. He whispered to her the same gentle reassurances he once gave Ngozi. "The Lord understands weakness," he murmured, his hand brushing hers. "You are not sinful, only human." Her breaths came quick, her eyes lowering as he led her into the shadowed sacristy. What Ngozi saw as a once-in-a-lifetime temptation was, for Damien, a repeated indulgence. He kissed the girl hungrily, with a familiarity that spoke of practice, not hesitation. This wasn't a man battling desire, it was a man enslaved by it. By morning, Damien stood at the altar, collar crisp, face solemn. His voice thundered with scripture about purity and repentance. The congregation wept, raising their hands to heaven. Only he knew the truth of the night before. Ngozi, sitting near the front, watched him with shining eyes, believing she was the reason for the cracks in his sermon. Believing she was the only one he dared risk heaven for. But in reality, she was just one more soul caught in the snare of his hunger. After that night, nothing remained the same. The confessional, once a sacred space of cleansing, now haunted Father Damien and Ngozi with the taste of their forbidden kiss. They moved through the parish like actors on a stage, their faces composed, their hands folded in prayer. Yet beneath the robes and rosaries, a secret burned hot and unrelenting. Sunday morning, Ngozi sang in the choir, her voice steady, her eyes lowered. But every time she lifted her gaze, she caught him watching. His sermon was about temptation, about the strength to overcome desire. The congregation nodded, moved by his passion. But Ngozi heard the cracks in his voice, felt the way his words aimed not at the flock but at her. That evening, she lingered behind after Vespers, pretending to tidy him books. Damien entered quietly, his cassock brushing the floor. Their eyes locked, and in that silence, their restraint shattered again. He crossed the chapel, seized her hand, and pulled her into the shadow of the sacristy. "Damien," she whispered, his name no longer carrying the weight of father. "This is wrong," he said, even as his lips found hers. His hands trembled, torn between blessing and sin, but his mouth claimed her with a hunger years of vows had starved. She melted into him, her rosary clattering onto the stone floor. Every kiss was a prayer unanswered, every touch a rebellion. They met in secret corners of the church, in the candlelit silence of the rectory, in whispered confessions after midnight. But the weight of it grew heavier each day. Guilt clawed at Damien, and yet he could not stop. At night, he knelt before the altar, begging for strength, but when he closed his eyes, it was not Christ's face he saw, it was Ngozi's. Her smile, her trembling lips, her whispered plea. "Then let us be mad together." And he knew, no matter how many times he prayed, the madness had already consumed him. Whispers had begun. At first they were faint, a curious glance here, a raised brow there. Parish women noticed how Father Damien's sermons had grown heavier, distracted. Some remarked on the way Ngozi's cheeks flushed too easily when he spoke to her. Others saw how he always seemed to find her in a crowded chapel, as though an invisible string bound their eyes together. One evening after Mass, Ngozi slipped quietly into the rectory. The corridors were dim, the walls lined with holy paintings, yet nothing about her steps felt holy. Damien was waiting, his hands clasped tightly, his collar undone like a man already surrendering. She reached for him, but just as their lips met, the door creaked. A parish attendant, carrying candles, froze at the sight of them in the shadows. The boy dropped the candles, the noise echoing like thunder. Damien shoved Ngozi away instinctively, but it was too late. The attendant's wide eyes said everything. Without a word, he bolted down the hall, leaving silence heavier than stone. Ngozi's chest heaved, her palms clammy. "He saw us," she whispered, panic lacing her voice. Damien's jaw clenched. "God, what have we done?" By the next morning, rumors swirled. It wasn't said outright, but tongues wagged in the market, in the courtyard, even after Mass. Some said Father Damien had grown too close to a certain girl. Others claimed they had seen him walking with her when he should have been alone. The parish council, though silent, began to watch him more closely. Every move, every word, every glance was measured against suspicion. Ngozi felt the walls closing in. She prayed harder, fasted longer, yet desire remained. Their love, once a private rebellion, was now a secret war against a community ready to burn them both at the stake of judgment. And still, when night came, she found herself slipping into the church, knowing he would be waiting. The day of reckoning arrived. Damien was summoned to the parish council, the air thick with suspicion. Ngozi, restless and anxious, hid in the back corridor, desperate to know what would happen. She pressed her ear to the wooden door as the elders confronted him. "Father Damien," one began sternly, "it is not only Ngozi whose name is whispered. There are others, choir girls, parish daughters, even married women. You have defiled this church." Ngozi's breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded so loud she feared they would hear it through the wall. She waited for him to deny it, to defend their love, to fight for what they shared. But Damien said nothing. His silence was confession enough. Tears streamed down her cheeks as the elders listed names, stories, warnings ignored. Every word was a knife twisting deeper. The man she thought had chosen her, the man she believed she alone had awakened, was nothing but a wolf in holy robes. When the council adjourned, Damien stepped out, his face pale, his collar loosened. Ngozi walked out of the parish that evening with her heart in shreds, but by the time night fell, grief had hardened into rage. He thought he could play her, just another name in his collection of sins. He thought she would remain silent like the others. But Damien had underestimated her. She sought out the other choir girls, whispering the truth she had overheard. At first they were ashamed, reluctant, but one by one they admitted it. He had touched them, kissed them, used the same words he once used on her. They were not special, only victims of his hunger. That night Ngozi laid her plan. One girl lured him into a small parish room, pretending to seek private counseling. She sat close, her voice dripping with suggestion. "Father," she teased, "don't you ever get tired of resisting? Don't you crave what you preach against?" His breathing grew heavy, his cassock straining as he reached for her. "You don't know what it does to me," he groaned. "Every night I burn." Just as he leaned in, the door swung open. Another girl stepped inside, and behind her stood Ngozi, her phone raised, recording. Damien froze, color draining from his face as his mask shattered. Ngozi's voice shook with fury. "How many, Damien? How many lies have you told? How many hearts have you broken? You told me I was your weakness, but I was just one of many." Cornered, he dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face. His voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I couldn't hold back. I crave a woman's touch every night. Forgive me, please. I never meant to." His sobs drowned the rest. But forgiveness was gone. By dawn, the video spread like wildfire. Parish members watched in shock as their holy priest confessed his lusts on camera. Mothers clutched their daughters, elders wept, and Damien, stripped of his dignity, fled the community in shame. Ngozi stood at the church gates, watching him disappear down the dusty road. She felt no joy, only a hollow ache where love once lived. But justice had been done.